When I find that my team is stressed, our business is making YouTube videos, for goodness sake. Let's take a step back. This is not life and death. I did not leave the NHS for this.
With so many opportunities and limited time, we often ask ourselves, how can we get it all done? Or maybe we shouldn't even try.
One of the big things we get wrong about productivity is...
Lots of people have suggested ways to be more productive. From Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog, Cal Newport's Deep Work, and Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks, there are plenty of answers out there. But Ali Abdaal has another idea.
There are 3 Ps, play, power, and people, that we can incorporate into anything we're doing, no matter how grim or boring or dull the thing might be. We can always incorporate these 3 Ps into our work if you just make it a little bit more fun.
He says finding ways to actually enjoy what you're doing isn't just a nice bonus, it's the key to real productivity. Ali is an author, YouTuber, doctor, and founder of a business that's really just about him. In this episode, Ali explains how adding more play can make the hard stuff easier. He'll talk about why delegation is so important, how to nail a career change, and the different ways to stay motivated.
Motivation is temporary, but there are in fact different forms of motivation. Oh yeah, there are 4 different types of motivation. And I was like, hold the fuck up. I swear there's only 2.
So, if you want to get more done without burning out, Ali has some ideas to help make work feel a little bit more like play. The reason I wanted to speak with Ali is because, the more we talk, the more I realize that Ali has this sort of je ne sais quoi that other entrepreneurs really miss. We're sometimes so in it. We're so deep in the detail. We really struggle to sort of zoom out and remember that all of this is kind of in service of enjoying the life that we have. A productive life ultimately should be measured by how good we're feeling whilst we're doing it and how in flow we are for it. Ali actually probably represents, out of all the entrepreneurs that I've met, the person who thinks about this equation the most, the person that is constantly challenging himself to come up with ways to scale his content, his business, his team, his everything about what he does in his life whilst feeling good and enjoying it without actually, compromising any of the revenue goals that any good entrepreneur has. He's on his target to 10 million this year. He'll probably get there. And in reality, for a bootstrap business founder, that is a sensational result. And he'll have done it by thinking constantly, how can I make this fun? How can I enjoy what I'm doing? And that inspires me all the time to think about how not to just sit with my stress and being busy, just enjoy what I'm doing and realize I need to connect it up to a higher purpose. So anyway, I've been hugely inspired by my conversations with Ali. I hope you are too. He's a great original thinker. So here you go. Here's Ali Abdaal on Secret Leaders. I hope you enjoy it. We're here to talk about productivity.
Sick.
Tell me a little bit about what you think we've got wrong about productivity.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things we get wrong about productivity is we think... Basically, it's this whole discipline thing. If you want to do something, you've got to work hard, you've got to grind, you've got to wake up at 4 a.m. and do and do the thing even when you don't feel like it. I think discipline is a bit of a scam, personally. I think it's a very nice thing that appeals to, a certain generation of young men. And people like David Goggins and stuff are promoting this discipline narrative, which is great because it works for them. But I always found in my life, I would hear all the discipline stuff and it wouldn't really vibe with me. And I would just, I would just feel bad that oh, maybe I'm just not disciplined enough and I don't seem to have the discipline to be able to grind and do shit that I actually don't want to do. So ultimately what I realized, through experimentation in my own life and also through doing a bunch of research for the book, is that the secret to productivity isn't discipline. It's actually joy. It's finding a way to feel good about the work that you're doing or whatever else you're doing. Because when you're having fun and when you feel like the thing you're doing is enjoyable and energizing, then you don't need to worry about discipline. Your productivity kind of takes care of itself.
Interesting. It's quite similar to, this is almost like a spiritual belief, digging around in that. I'm currently reading The Artist's Way. Have you read that?
Oh yeah, Julia Cameron. That's great.
So it's a sort of similar sort of vibe in terms of there's a process, right? And there's a process of sort of unearthing that, that creativity. Yeah. And I'm wondering, you're saying everything we've got about productivity, the narrative in general is wrong, right? If you're waiting for motivation, it's never going to come. It's just about process, getting into discipline. What would the process therefore be about getting
out of those bad behaviors that we have in society around productivity and into better ones?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's like a few different levels that we can take this at. I like to start with a level of like people's day to day. You know, Simon Sinek would say you should start with why and all that kind of stuff. But usually like starting with why and finding your purpose and meaning and mission, all that stuff is important. But for most normal people, that's not the thing that they particularly like. If someone suddenly decides that, oh, my mission is to do thing X and therefore I have to quit my job, you know, if you're born with a trust fund, then you can just quit your job and follow your passion. So I'm not about that approach. My approach and my process is basically take whatever you're doing right now and just find a way to make it 10% more enjoyable and 10% more energizing. And to that end, there are 3 Ps, play, power, and people, that we can incorporate into anything we're doing, no matter how grim or boring or dull the thing might be. We can always incorporate these 3 Ps into our work to just make it a little bit more fun. And what the research shows is that if you can feel good about the work or anything else you're doing, you're more likely to be productive, you're more likely to be creative, you're less stressed, and you also end up with more energy to give to the other important areas of your life. So 3 Ps, play, power, people.
Take me through the 3 Ps. Like, do you have a little process for each? Like, how would I integrate any of those Ps into my life? Give me a practical example.
Absolutely, yeah. So in the book, there's like a whole 6 experiments and 3 strategies for each one. But the main thing for play, and play is, I think, the most underrated productivity technique out there.
And probably the one that people think is bollocks, right?
Yeah,
because everyone thinks that. So productivity is so aligned generally with work. Work people think is serious. And certainly where we align and where we've talked about a lot, is actually having fun at work and it just being an enjoyable endeavor to be entrepreneurs. But people just take things very seriously. And in the business world, people are very serious. And we're not very serious people, either of us.
Yeah.
So I think that's the part where people generally misalign, is thinking that if it's fun, you're probably not a real business person.
Yeah, this is one of the experiments in the book. There's a quote from Alan Watts, the philosopher, who you'll be familiar with, given your bookshelf, where he says, essentially, don't be serious, be sincere. And a lot of effort, a lot of energy is wasted on just being too serious about stuff. I think Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, also said, one of the primary plagues that plagues our society is the fact that we just ascribe way too much importance to our work. And what I found when doing a bunch of research into play is that play basically happens when 2 things are true. Number 1, you have high engagement, and number 2, you have low stakes. So if, for example, Roger Federer is defending his Wimbledon title, he's got high engagement, but the stakes are very high. So he's not particularly feeling playful in that environment because the stakes are just too high. Whereas in most of our jobs, in most of our work, we imagine as if the stakes are higher than they actually are. And we just need to sort of dial down that dial of importance and seriousness to get to a point where we can be engaged, but still treat it with a bit of distance, treat it in the spirit of play. Like, we're all only on this earth for like a short time. What's the use in being so serious about this stuff? And what I realized is, I spent a bunch of time in working in hospitals, in operating theaters and stuff, even when...
I hope you thought those were important.
I thought those were important, yeah. But even when life and death is on the line, like the best surgeons were the ones who created an atmosphere of lightness in the operating theater. They'd have background music on. They'd have like Take That and Robbie Williams and stuff playing in the background. If there was like a super serious bit of the operation that was like absolutely critical, they would say, "Hey, can we turn down the music, please?" 5 minutes later, resume the music. And a bunch of research in hospitals as well around kind of what are the things that cause mistakes to happen in surgery. A lot of it is around when the atmosphere is so serious and so tense that the juniors and the nurses don't feel able to speak up. They feel like, hang on, this surgeon's operating on the wrong leg. But like, oh no, he's probably right. He probably knows what he's doing. Perhaps I've got it wrong. And then the patient gets the wrong leg amputated, which is like very bad. Or a patient gets administered a drug that they're actually allergic to. And the physician associate recognizes this, but doesn't want to speak up because it's just too serious. Whereas the surgeons who can create this atmosphere of lightness and ease, even in the midst of life and death, that tends to be where real performance and creativity and productivity, dare I say, tends to shine.
They had this amazing... Have you read Black Box Thinking before?
I haven't read it, no.
Matthew Syed.
Yeah.
So it's a great book. It's about, so black boxes in planes, right? And so the idea is that it's about failure, essentially, and how we deal with failure and how you communicate it. And it has this great example. In the airline industry, you have black boxes. If a plane goes down, not only is there evidence of all the things that happen, but then everyone talks about it. Everyone learns, like, these are all the reasons and all the things that went wrong leading up to the core decisions in that moment that the pilot felt. And how do we make sure that doesn't happen next time? Versus in especially America, but in general health systems. Healthcare systems have the exact opposite. You make a mistake as a doctor, you're on the line, you can be sued. And therefore, the entire system is set up absolutely around perfection and no admission of failure whatsoever. And the idea that someone below you can tell you that you're doing something wrong is also like highly precarious because it could impact their career, it could impact your career. And so everyone's just terrified of doing it, which is why actually there's tons of mistakes that still happen. People do sadly die from innocuous things. One of our guests, and I'm sure you know him as well, Mo Gordat, his son died from a simple procedure, a small mistake. And that stuff literally happens when you're scared to be honest about what people are doing. So it's interesting because it's not just, how do you make things more productive? It's actually how do you create safer, better work cultures in general.
Yeah. And like this thing around psychological safety, emotional safety, creating these sorts of environments of safety in the workplace really allows creativity to flourish as well. Like if managers and leaders and stuff care about the bottom line, and it's, sometimes I've heard people say, well, I don't want my employees having fun at work. It's like, bruv, your employees having fun at work means they're more likely to be creative. And most of us, most of the value is found in the creativity of the team rather than in just sort of trying to be more efficient and just churning out more and more widgets.
I can't remember who said this quote, but I came across it. Sounds like a Naval, but see if you know it. Cannot overstate the absolute unimportance of almost everything.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It's so
That's
good.
so good.
It's so good because it does help reframe that most things that happen in your life are not important. A handful of things are. And a handful of things are, like you said, you should take that thing seriously. You should put lots of effort in. But the rest of it, if you treat everything with the same level of importance, you'll end up just burnt out anyway. You won't have any energy or fuel left to be productive, creative, or have fun.
Have you read the blog post of the subtle art of not being a fuck, of not giving a fuck?
No, I read the book. But
Yeah, so it started off as a blog post in like 2015 or something. And when Mark Manson put out that blog post, I've been following him for a while. I saw the email, I saw the title, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And it's like the most entertaining blog post I've ever read in my life. And then that blog post went viral, which is how he got the book deal for the book. But that's basically the argument of the whole thing. Like, we all give way too many fucks about things. And if we just gave fewer fucks, we can save our fucks for the things that actually matter, the few things that are actually important, not everything else that isn't.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, how do you actually find the balance between what matters and what doesn't matter? Have you found a process for that?
Other than recognizing that almost everything is relatively unimportant, no. One thing I often say to my team, I think, because I worked as a doctor for 2 years and then I did the entrepreneur thing. When I find that my team is stressed, like, our business is making YouTube videos, for goodness sake. I sometimes say, guys, let's take a step back. This is not life and death. We're not in the emergency room. I did not leave the NHS for this. And just that sense of perspective, because otherwise it's so easy to get like wrapped up in our own worlds, in our own heads. And all I have to do is think back to working in the emergency department where people are literally bleeding out and dying in the middle of COVID. And like, there's very few staff around because everyone's off. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're making YouTube videos and releasing online courses and doing podcasts every now and then. Who cares if a guest cancels last minute? Great. We can all just grab a coffee. Like, life is good. We don't need to worry about it.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because it's kind of like you do want to employ people who think the work is important and they take their job seriously, but you don't want people who take the whole thing so seriously, if that makes sense. You want them to care about their work, but not care so much that they lose perspective.
Yeah, I think that's why I like the Alan Watts quote, where he's like, don't be serious, be sincere. So if, for example, you're playing a board game, you don't want to play with someone who's too serious because they're a stickler for the rules and they forget that it's a game. But you also don't want to play with someone who's completely half-assed because that's just not fun. It's like, they're not really trying. It's like, oh, come on, man. You want to play with someone who's sincere, who's sincerely putting in their best effort to try and win, but who also has that perspective of, hey, at the end of the day, it's just a game. Who cares? And I think if we can just take that mentality and apply it to all of our jobs, obviously, except if you're an airplane pilot or life and death, then I think everyone would be more productive, more creative, and less stressed.
Speaking of Alan Watts quotes, I'll butcher it a bit, but relevant, which is, he talks about life, how we're all so serious in our lives and we're trying to get from school into university, and from university into medical profession, and then from junior doctor into main doctor, etc., and how everything is like got to complete the next thing, complete the next thing, complete the next thing, is actually the wrong way to look at it, because life is a dance. And dances don't really have a start, middle, end. They just flow, they just go as you wish. There's no rhyme or reason, and a good dance and a bad dance, fine line between them. They're just a dance. They just flow. And that's much better for life. And I just I love that equation to it.
Yeah, just while we're trading Alan Watts quotes, he's got another really good one around how like he's got one analogy which is life is like a dance, and his other one is that life is like a musical performance. The point is not the climax. The point is not the destination, because if it were, the best composers would be the ones who create the most climaxes. Or the point is not to get through it faster and faster, because if it were, then the best musicians would be the ones who can play faster and faster and faster. The point of a musical performance is to enjoy the musical performance, not to get to the climax. And so similarly with life, the point is to enjoy life, not to be so fixated on trying to do the thing faster and go faster and faster on the hamster wheel.
Yeah. And so how to know that you're literally living your best life right now.
That's the one. Power of now.
I'm going to level with you. I'm not the best manager in the world. I'm a decent coach, but management is my co-founder's thing, not mine. And thank God for that, because developing your team is one of the single most high leverage things you can do as a leader, which is why I'm really happy we're working with Personio. They're the all-in-one HR platform you need to handle everything, from hiring to onboarding, handling absences to managing compensation. Their features touch every point of the employee lifecycle, from onboarding right through to exit interviews. And because they automate so much of the boring but necessary HR admin, you and your managers can focus on getting the best out of your people. So, if you're leading a growing business and want to spend less time on HR admin, then book a demo at personio.com/secret leaders. That's personio.com/secret leaders. There's a link in the show notes.
Okay, so you talked about being a doctor for a few years and then moving into entrepreneurship and YouTube, etc. You probably get this question a lot, but bear with me. How do you make a great career change like that? And how do you make it work?
Yeah. So I have a theory, which is that, so a lot of people ask me, it's like, should I quit my job to follow my passion? My answer is always, no, don't do that. First, make money from your passion first and figure out a way to support yourself financially. And then you can think about quitting your job further down the line. I think weirdly, so for the first 3 years of my YouTube channel, and for the 5 years before that I was running a business in medical school, I was either a full-time medical student or I was working full-time as a doctor. And what that meant was I only really had 10 to 20 spare hours a week to be able to do businessy type stuff. And therefore I was really focused and I really prioritized the things that actually moved the needle. Whereas when I quit my job and became a full-time YouTuber, suddenly my video output actually ground to a halt, because now I was like screwing around, faffing around, sort of doing lots of things that didn't actually move the needle and move me towards my goals. And it's that the whole thing with Parkinson's law, work expands to fill the time that you allocate to it. So like the week after I took a break from medicine, I was like, oh, I've got all the time in the world. I just need to film 2 videos this week. And I didn't film any videos that week, because every day I'd get up, I'd go on the computer, I'd screw around on YouTube and, browsing Instagram stuff. And I've got loads of time to film this video. It will get to 9 p.m. and I'd be like, well, the light's gone now, so I guess I'll film it tomorrow. And that happened again and again and again. Whereas when I had a full-time job, I was forced to, wake up an hour early so that I could bang out the video. I was forced to find the 80-20 of, what is the minimum viable level of editing I can give to a video before putting it out there. I was forced to just reduce my own perfectionism and reduce like the impact of Parkinson's law and all of this stuff. And that was how the YouTube channel grew and how the business grew. And so when people say I want to quit my job to follow my passion, it's like, I generally recommend don't do that. Find a way to monetize the passion first. Do it on the side, do it in weekends and evenings, while you still have an income coming in. And then once you get to a point where you're making $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month, then you can consider quitting your job.
Nice. How many people do you speak to who've just done this completely wrong? And how do you help them take a U-turn on that?
I actually speak to very few people who are in that position, because I think a lot of times the fear of making a career change is a lot greater in imagination than in reality, as Mark Twain would say, or something.
Yeah.
I know almost no one who has made a career change who has regretted making the career change, but I know tons and tons of people who have been thinking about making a career change for years and have not yet made their career change because they are scared of all of the things that could potentially go wrong. So I do think that as much as, it's good to have a bit of a safety blanket, it's good to find a way to make money not tied to your job. Like the risk of doing a career change is a lot lower than most people think. Because let's say I've got a job earning 50 grand a year and I think, oh, but I really want to do this new industry instead or start a business. It's easy to think of that as a 50 grand risk, but it's actually not, because the risk is like, maybe my current job is paying 50 grand and maybe that was quite hard to get into. But if I've got a 50K job, I could probably fairly easily walk into a 40K job, for example. Like it won't be too hard. And actually, there's a lot of studies that show when you quit your job, if you apply to a new one, you tend to get a salary increase rather than salary decrease. So really, the only risk of quitting my job is the few months where I don't have a paycheck going on. And if everything goes wrong, I could just always get another job. And so it's a 10 grand risk rather than a 50 grand risk. So I think a lot of people like overthink the risks of this sort of thing without realizing that actually the risks aren't that bad. You can always make a change and you can always build a business in weekends and evenings rather than having to go at it full time.
Okay. You've made it in a very competitive industry, being YouTube creator. Why do you think you've made it versus others?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. Firstly, I have now been doing it for 7 years. I have been publishing at least one video every week for the last 7 years, almost without fail.
Yeah, an overnight success.
No, overnight success, exactly. And, about 5,000 something students have gone through my YouTuber Academy course. These are students who pay several $1,000s to take a course where I'm literally guiding them through the process. We have a whole support team holding their hand through the process. And still, of the 5,000 students that we've had, 50% of them don't even submit their first video. Life gets in the way. They're like overthink it, the perfectionism paralysis. They're like,
people love to pay for things that they think they're going to do. And that tends to fill the need weirdly.
Yeah.
They don't even do the thing, but paying for it.
So like half the people don't even make the first video. We it's like a 6-week course. And so we find that the percentage of people who submit video 6 is about 11%. So already there's like people have signed up to this thing with the best will in the world, and 90% of them don't even make it beyond video number 5. Then, the stats like podcasts, like sort of like 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. 99% don't make it past episode 20. Mm-hmm. So literally just by doing it for a few months consistently, you're already in the top 1%. So I think the main thing that stops people from succeeding on YouTube or any of these content mediums is just giving up way too soon and not realizing that it takes years to see any kind of meaningful results. I think that's one thing. But I think another is almost from day one, I was treating YouTube as a business. I'd spent like 5-6 years running a business before then. I'd read a few business books. And so I kind of had the perspective of YouTube for me is not a hobby. It's like, if I wanted to have fun, I'd play the guitar, I'd hang out with my friends. Like the goal is for this to become something. And therefore, how can I apply the principles of business to growing a YouTube channel? How can I think about my target audience and my value proposition? How can I actively think about who are the competitors out there? If I was starting a restaurant, I wouldn't just decide to start a restaurant because I enjoyed cooking. I would recognize that starting a restaurant and making it profitable is very different to being a good chef. I'd be figuring out like, what's the footfall of other restaurants in the area? What are the competitors? Like, what other Italian, Indian, Lebanese restaurants are there in the area? What's their profitability? How can I differentiate myself in the market? And I'd be thinking about that quite a lot. So I was doing that with YouTube almost from day one. The danger with that, again, so most people are not consistent enough to see any meaningful results. But another thing that holds a lot of people back is that they overthink and they don't act. So the way I think of it is like, you can overthink and analyze the business and stuff all you want, but it must be on the foundation of publishing at least one video a week, at least in the sort of educational YouTube talking head kind of mode. So consistency, thinking about it like a business, and a healthy dose of luck. I started YouTube at the right time. I started in 2017. Everyone was saying YouTube was saturated in 2017. People were telling Tim Ferriss that podcasting was saturated in 2014. Like every platform always seems saturated, but there always seems to be room for people to carve out their own niche, especially if you can commit to doing it for a very long time.
And how do you think about audience? Like, how do you know who you're trying to go after with building an audience on YouTube? Does it sort of just magically happen, or are there like ways that you can preach and teach others to find their people?
Yeah, so it's sort of a conversation between like the creator and the market. And so the way we think about this is, as the creator, you want to be thinking about who are the groups of people that I am part of or that I resonate with. So, for example, it wouldn't make sense for me to try and make videos for parents because I'm not a parent. Like, that's just completely pointless. But, I could make videos for medical students. I could make videos for amateur magicians. I could make videos for junior doctors. I could make videos for people in their 20s. There's a bunch of groups that I have that I'm part of that could be my target audience. The other way of thinking about it is, could my target audience just be me, but a few years ago? I think that tends to be how a lot of educational YouTubers find their audience. It's like, what are the things I've learned in the last 5 years? And great, how can I teach those to people who are 5 years younger than me? So in my case, it was initially how to study for exams, how to get into med school. Then it became how to be productive. Then it became how to start a business. And as I've grown older, kind of my audience has, my sense of my audience has always been, it is a dude in the UK who is a few years younger than me. And as they say in, I think, 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, the target is not the market. Apple's products are targeted at creative professionals. But just because they're targeted at creative professionals doesn't mean you have to be a creative professional to buy an Apple product. Most people that buy Nike shoes are not, in fact, professional athletes, even though that's what they're going for. So even though I'm going for, a dude in their mid-20s trying to start a business, trying to do a side hustle, trying to be more productive, actually, what that means is, if I can specifically speak to that person, then the sorts of people that would resonate with my stuff is a lot bigger than that person.
Yeah, I love that.
So you're kind of thinking, I guess it's similar to a business. It's like one way of coming up with business ideas is thinking, who are the groups that I would like to be serving? Like who would be exciting to serve? Preferably, which of those people actually have money? And then let's figure out what problems they have and what problems I can solve. And it's exactly the same thing with a YouTuber. Who are the groups I'd be excited to serve? What are their problems? And then how can I make videos solving those problems?
How have you learned in your process of YouTubing in general? How have you thought about productivity in relation to growing your business, creating videos, creating a productive, joyful process for yourself? Like, how has that kind of journey changed?
Yeah, so I think in the early days, for me, the goal was I just need to make one video a week. And in the early days of the process, I was doing something completely new. I knew nothing about editing or filming or lighting and all of this sort of stuff. And I was in medical school and my friends were around and stuff. And I'd be kind of making the videos and just focusing on that goal of making one video a week. That to me was productivity. How do I just make this one video a week? Eventually, the goal of just making one video a week stopped being fun because everything stops being fun after a while. But I recognized, because I was sort of kind of simmering on this philosophy of like, hey, for some reason, whenever I make things feel good, I seem to do better at them, whether it was exams in medical school or anything else I was doing. So I tried to actively find ways to make the process more enjoyable. So then I would be like, okay, in this video, I'm going to try this new editing trick or that new editing trick. Then I realized, oh, YouTube is kind of like a business. And so I was like, oh, how can I systemize the production of this? How can I 80-20 things? And that also made it more fun. So at each stage of the process, the thing that I was focused on was recognizing that if I focus on a goal that's outside of my control, I'm going to burn out and I'm not going to do the thing. But if I focus on a goal that's within my control and make the process of achieving that goal actually enjoyable, that's the thing that's going to keep on going. That's going to keep me going. And I also heard a really good phrase, and I think applies to so many things, not just YouTube, which is that your first 100 videos are going to be absolutely garbage. So the goal is to get through those first 100 videos and then worry about things later. So I started in 2017, and I said, okay, cool. I'm in my final year of med school. I'm going to make 100 videos while I'm in med school so that when I graduate and become a doctor, at that point, I will actually be good at making videos. And I speak to so many people who are like, oh man, my channel's not growing. I'm only on a few hundred subscribers. And I look at the channel and they've made like 4 videos. And I'm like, bruv, it took me 52 videos to get my first 1,000 subscribers. Another 50 to get the next 10,000 and so on. It's like, it grows exponentially over time. But you've got to keep in mind that this is the long-term game. And I think increasingly people are starting YouTube channels and podcasts and stuff in the hope of making money. And as you all know, it's really hard to grow a podcast. It's really hard to make money from a podcast. Yeah. It's really hard to grow a YouTube channel.
Yeah, we've learned that. Yeah.
It's so hard to
sympathizers in the room.
It's so hard to do. There are so many more efficient ways of making money.
Yeah.
And so really it has to be about enjoying the process.
Yeah. Simon Sinek talks about the infinite game. I've heard you talk about the infinite game. It's genius. Talk to us a little bit about the infinite game.
Yeah. So, and there's a book, Finite and Infinite Games. I haven't read it. I've read the first page of it where the guy, Scott.
That's fine. Give us all your expertise from that first page.
From the first page. Basically what he says is that there are 2 types of games in life. There are finite games and infinite games. Finite games are played with the intention of winning, and infinite games are played with the intention of continuing to play the game. So when you're playing football, for example, it's got an end, it's got a score, the goal is to win. But when you're hanging out with your friends or when you're having dinner with your spouse, hopefully the intention is not to win the interaction. Hopefully the intention is to keep the relationship healthy and flowing and fun so that you can continue to do the thing. Now, for me, when it comes to business, and certainly like with my YouTube channel and writing books and stuff, I try my best to view that as an infinite game where there is no real goal. I mean, there is a goal, but like the point is not to win. The point isn't for the book to hit the New York Times bestseller list, or the point isn't for the YouTube channel to hit a particular subscriber count. The point is I've built a business and a life where I can do what I want, have cool conversations with people, learn stuff and share it online and make decent money doing it. That is sick. Let's keep that the infinite game, and let's focus on making the process durable and sustainable so that I can keep continuing to play the game. And, again, there's parallels in the world of business. More businesses die through indigestion than through starvation, as someone famous once said. I don't know who it was. It might have been Peter Drucker.
It was Robbie Williams.
Robbie Williams, love it. And so,
sorry, that one was Gary Barlow, actually. My bad.
And so when you try to take on too much stuff and like do more and more things, there's something Mr. Beast often talks about, which is that YouTubers will get big and then they'll think, oh, I'm big on YouTube, therefore let me do all these other things. And then their channel will suffer. And they'll realize that everything else that they've done has also suffered because the channel was the main thing. And so, again, in the business world, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing for me is being able to learn cool stuff and share it online in the format of books and podcasts and videos. And so that is the goal. That's the infinite game that I'm trying to go for, which means that I'm not that weathered by the ups and downs of the algorithm or the ups and downs of the channel, because the only goal is to just continue playing the game.
If everything gets boring, otherwise, it no longer product. You're not finding that joy. You can't therefore be really productive. And after a while, everything's boring. How does that sit with you still being a YouTuber, with the infinite game being teaching people forever, etc.? Like, how do you deal with those two conflicting emotions?
Yeah, I used to worry about this. So back when I wasn't in a relationship, I would ask people like, hey, you're married and or have been in a long-term relationship for like more than a few years. Like, don't you get bored of the same person? Because it's like, surely if you're just talking to the same person and having dinner with them 10,000 times, surely it gets boring after a while. And I asked this to one of my friends who was at that point married, and he was like, well, do you get bored of your friends? I was like, no, not really. He was like, why don't you get bored of your friends? I was like, I don't know, because it's like the same people that you hang out with, but like we're always growing, we're always doing different things, trying to find ways to make it fun. We're not just playing the same board game again and again and again, which might be a bit boring. We're sort of changing things up. And I think it's the same thing with YouTube or work. It's like, yeah, for me, if I were still making the same videos I was making 7 years ago, I'd be pretty bored. But a huge part of how I've been able to sustain this for such a long time is constantly asking myself, how do I make this process actually enjoyable? So it would be more efficient for growth of the YouTube channel if I only talked about productivity, especially, or even better if I only talked about how to make money online, because those videos do really well and they have good like revenues and good sponsorship rates and stuff. But I know that it would bore me to only make videos about productivity or only make videos about making money, which is why these days I make occasional chatty videos and I do vlogs and I do videos about relationships and I read this spirituality book, let me do a video about that. Even though it's not optimized for the algorithm, it's still optimized for fun. And there's a great quote I came across from a video game designer who said something like, left to their own devices, gamers will optimize the fun out of the game they're playing. When I was playing World of Warcraft back in the day, I'd be sort of trying to optimize everything, min-max my character, so much grinding and stuff. And you realize I've turned this into a job. I've optimized the fun out of it. And so why have I done that? The point is to play the game. And so I think with business and with YouTube and with all this stuff, it's easy to focus on the growth and the optimization, but we don't want to optimize the fun out of everything.
Are you building a SaaS or venture-backed business? Or are you just trying to grow internationally? Well, if potential customers or investors haven't already asked you about ISO 27001, SOC 2, or GDPR compliance, they probably will soon. Achieving compliance can unlock major growth for your company, but the process is often time-intensive and costly. This is where our partner, Vanta, can help. Vanta automates up to 90% of compliance work, getting you audit ready in weeks instead of months and saving you significant costs. Plus, Vanta scales with your business, helping you successfully enter new markets, land bigger deals, and earn customers' trust. As a special offer, Secret Leaders listeners get 20% off Vanta when they go to vanta.com/secretleaders. That's VANT.com/secretleaders for 20% off. There's a link in the description.
So how do you make like productivity, I guess, how do you communicate productivity across the team? So one of the things that I think is interesting, and we talked about this recently, so if you don't mind, I'll share.
Please.
You've just gone remote, and or not just, but you're in the you know, a few months of remote. That's because you want to do what you want to do. Like at the end of the day, you're the talent, and you don't want to be stuck bored, and you want to explore life, and etc. etc. And you want to do this fucking video on spirituality, and I read this one on relationships, but you got a team, and you've got to pay their salaries.
Yeah.
And so how do you map out this idea of Ali needs to make things productive so that he can stay really engaged, etc. As the creator and the CEO, and those things are really important, but they also might be misaligned with the growth of the channel and therefore the employees and their career opportunities, etc. Do you consciously think about those things downstream? Do you communicate them with their team? Have I just created a revelation? You're like, oh, fuck, I should have thought this through. Where are we at with this?
Yeah, great question. I think about this all the time because I realized very long ago when I first started hiring team members, like 5 years ago now, that my enjoyment of the process was like the primary thing. And if I stopped enjoying the process of making videos, it just wouldn't happen. Now, my enjoyment of the process, as you pointed out, sometimes might mean that the channel doesn't grow as fast. And so if the business is reliant on the channel growing fast or the channel getting views, that is a really stressful business to run because now these things are out of alignment. It's like the business needs one thing, but my enjoyment needs something else. So the way that we've kind of gone about this over the last few years and something we're really continuing in 2024 is really figuring out how do we make the business survive and thrive without me having to continually churn out more videos. So, we did 5 million revenue last year. We're going for maybe 8 this year. I really want to get to 10 million because I think it would just be fun. And in the past, the only route I saw to 10 million revenue was me just churning out more and more videos. I've realized over time through speaking to entrepreneurs and having chats with you and listening to a bunch of podcasts and reading books that, there are actually multiple routes to the goal of 10 million revenue. And one of those paths is Ali makes way more sponsored YouTube videos, but there are loads and loads of other paths. And finding people who have been on those paths and exploring them, we could do software, we could do B2B, we could do corporate learning and development. We could do a high ticket offer with fulfillment that's decorrelated from my own time. There's all these options out there now that I did not really appreciate before. So actually after this, after we have lunch, I'm heading towards to a 3-hour product brainstorming session with a friend of mine who's a third-time founder, and we're going to try and figure out ways cool productivity software to build. We've already started doing that. Can we create products and assets that do not rely on me, that are maybe even not like Ali Abdaal branded, so that I can use my YouTube channel as a marketing asset for lead gen, but I don't have to just continually churn out videos in order to grow the business. We started running paid ads a few months ago, and we've seen every week we're returning our return on ad spend is somewhere between 2.5 and 30x, which is just super cool. We had a Black Friday promotion for our YouTuber course. We did 500K in revenue in those 3 days, Black Friday to Cyber Monday. And all of them were through ConvertKit email automations that our marketing guy set up ahead of time. While he was on his honeymoon in the Maldives, and while I was on a beach in Mexico, all of these automations were working behind the scenes. I didn't have to make a single YouTube video for it. And we generated 500 grand in revenue thanks to these email automations and segmentations and stuff. That was sick. I was like, oh my God, we can make money in a way that's decorrelated from me making more YouTube videos. So this is something we think about a lot.
And that is a perfect example of productivity in action, right? Fundamentally, you've set up a system, a process with your team, and created 2 joyful moments where the person who's set it up and you are benefiting with joy of something that's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, it was super cool. The other framework that I've started using a lot, I was going to put this in the book, but then the editor cut it out because it was getting too complicated, is the GPS framework. So goal, plan, and system. And I think a lot of productivity is about just getting this stuff right. The goal, where are we trying to go? What's the destination? The plan, what is the path to getting there? What are the 3 to 5 big chess moves that we need to do to get to the goal? And system, how do we ensure that every day and every week we're sticking to the plan? And then you just review and assess and stuff. And with that, with a clear goal, a clear plan, and a clear system for sticking to the plan, there is very little that can really go wrong if you just do that repeatedly over time. And this is what I've realized, again, taking advice from the world of business. I used to be anti-goal setting because I used to be like, oh, well, I don't want to be wedded to this thing. And like, I don't want to be disappointed if I don't hit the goal. I've realized that I can set a goal and also choose to not be disappointed if we don't hit it. But like all businesses function based on annual goals and quarterly goals and OKRs. And you've got like marriage OKRs, and that's like super cool. And I now realize, oh my God, when you know where you're going and you know where you like, and you know the path to getting there, it's so much easier to do. Whereas in the past, I used to sort of be scrambling and sort of making shit up as I went along.
Well, I think part of that as well, if you have a team, which you do, right? And I think this is one of the things where because you're a YouTuber, because you're a creator, people assume you might be a solopreneur, right? But you have a team. And so when you do have a team, you know, productivity really is about alignment. Does everyone understand where you're going? And are they working towards the same goals? And where that stuff isn't clear, you suddenly get a lot of really busy, unproductive work. Unproductive because it produces fuck all that matters towards the goal, but everyone's super busy.
Yeah. So, and in many ways, actively counterproductive, because I've had lots of times in the past where my vision has been like very shaky. And so one of our team members has made like 4 months of progress on a thing. And then I have decided to U-turn and like, we're not doing that thing anymore. And initially I was like, well, you know, I'm still paying the salary. Like, why do they care if it's 4 months wasted effort? But they really care that they spent 4 months working on this thing. And it seems like wasted effort because I was re-listening to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People yesterday. Absolutely sick.
Yeah.
And he just threw out a phrase, like I didn't really get this the first time around, but it was something like, treat your employees as volunteers because you can buy their back, but you can't buy their heart and their mind. And their enthusiasm comes from their heart and their creativity comes from their mind. And I was like, whoa, fuck, that's good. Treat your employees as volunteers. So literally I've updated my kind of daily journaling prompt to ask the question, how can I show my team appreciation today? Brackets, remember they're volunteers. And so the mistake that I made is like not recognizing that if someone has put in 4 months of work into a project and it gets canceled, that actually really affects their soul and their heart on like an emotional level to feel as if their work has been wasted, even though I was technically paying them for the time. And so it has been actively counterproductive for me to be so shaky on my vision. And now I spend a lot of my time as the leader of the business basically thinking, where are we actually trying to go? And a few years ago, if someone had told me that, oh, you know, the only job of the leader of the business really is to sort of set the direction, I'd have been like, bloody hell, that sounds easy. Like, what? So they're just chilling the rest of the time and everyone's doing all the work? And it's like, yeah, kind of. But it takes a lot of like thought and journaling and talking to people and figuring things out to set the direction. One analogy I've been using with Angus, who's my general manager / CEO, is like, we're sort of on a ship and Angus is the captain of the ship, but I'm like the madman up there at the top on the sails with a little telescope being like, there's an island over there that I think that's our path to 10 million in revenue. And then
there'll be treasure.
Yeah, there'll be treasure. And then once I'm really sure that that's where we want to go, then the captain can like mobilize the troops to get there. But if I'm like looking around and I'm not sure and I'm like, oh, we could do this or this or this or this, now everyone's floundering and the ship comes to a standstill.
Which is interesting because the thing that is missing in that analogy almost is the level of trust that has to be earned from Angus and the rest of the team that Ali is actually working on that important thing. Because that's quite an invisible thing, right? And that's one of the problems you get as CEO is I'm working on the vision and everyone's like,
well, so you're getting a massage and
you're going on podcasts,
Yeah.
You're doing this, you're hanging out with that person,
Yeah.
you're reading these books, mate. Looks like luxury life, you're not doing anything. You're like, but I'm filling up my brain
Yeah.
with all the right inputs to have the clear thinking required to make the right decision, right?
Yeah.
And you know, as Shane Parrish said, who like came on our podcast, you know, everything's actually just about positioning. Like anyone looks like a genius if they position themselves well enough for the right opportunity to come. And that can only sort of come if you clear the decks, get the inputs, and then say, we're going in that direction. And then you can be exceptionally productive working towards the right path.
Absolutely.
Let's actually focus on productivity for entrepreneurs. How does your general entrepreneur that you view,
Yeah.
right? So the ones that you see in your life, how do they become more productive? What is it that we need to know to uncover your secret, your magic?
One thing that this is not an original idea by any means, but the way I think of it is when it comes to tasks, there are 2 types of tasks. There are quests and there are errands. I like this terminology because of video games and stuff. I think Cal Newport calls it, there is deep work and then there is shallow work or something. I don't even know what he uses. That kind of thing. So for me, a quest is something that takes at least one focus block to get done. So writing the copy for a landing page would be a quest because it would take at least a few focus sessions to do that. A focus session can be anything from 20 minutes to 45 minutes, something like that. Whereas errands are anything that takes less than one focus session to do. I think one of the big level ups for my productivity as an entrepreneur has been recognizing that I should have distinct blocks for quests and distinct blocks for errands. But crucially, I must have at least one quest block before I do any errands. Because it tends to be the quests, the meaty stuff that takes at least one focus block, if not more, to do. That tends to be the stuff that moves us forward as entrepreneurs. Whereas the tasks, the errands, tends to be just stuff that keeps us afloat. Things like, I don't know, replying to this person or sending that email or sorting out the accounts with this sort of thing. It's really that deep work block, this focus quest block that makes us make progress. And whenever I have started the day with errands, because there's always errands, always like a zillion Slack messages when you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh shit, okay, cool, I should do all this stuff. You can spend the whole day spinning your wheels and just sort of keeping the ship afloat by paddling very hard and not actually moving anywhere. Whereas I find that if I do at least half an hour to 1 hour, at least ideally 4, 5, 6, but stuff often comes up. As long as I have that 30 to 60 minutes where I've made focused progress on the thing that's most important for me to do, then everything else kind of takes care of itself.
Two counter processes that you're familiar with. We talked about the Artist Way. So in the Artist Way, she talks about morning pages. And I can't remember who else said this. Like maybe you can if I start saying it. There's something about a funnel. You've got loads of shit and you just need to clean it all out and then you start to get the good stuff coming through.
Yep.
And that's essentially the same process she's talking about with morning pages, which is if you haven't read it, it's just wake up and write down 3 pages of whatever comes to your mind. And the idea is you're just clearing out your head. It doesn't matter if it's good. It doesn't matter if it's nothing. It doesn't matter if it's just the same word over and over again, or I've got nothing to say. I've got nothing to say. I've got nothing to say. Just do it. And the idea there is you're suddenly in a more creative place to work. The other concept, and I've used this one myself a lot, is Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog, which is you get the most difficult, most horrible task that is going to get in your way, because procrastination is probably the enemy of productivity. And so how do you make sure you don't procrastinate all day? Everyone's a big procrastinator. I'm a big procrastinator, even though people think I'm super efficient. We all do it. So Eat That Frog is a very good process. The idea there obviously being that if the worst thing you have to do today is eat a frog, then just get it done first thing. So what's your frog? Just get it done. It's the first thing today. So those are 2 famous frameworks. They're kind of the opposite of the framework that you're suggesting, which is just get the thing that I'd love to do the most important task, just get that done first. First part of this is how many of those frameworks can you fit in to make your own? And second is what I really want to know, what does a really productive day look like for you? So what is the ideal day?
So actually, I use all 3 frameworks.
Excellent. I was hoping you'd say that. So take us through a really productive day.
For me, a really productive day is I've done the gym in the morning. I have eaten my protein shake or whatever the thing is. Ideally, before doing any small tasks or any errands, I've carved out 30 to 60 minutes to make focused progress on my one main goal. These days, my one main goal is to launch Productivity Lab, which is a sort of Peloton for productivity that we're trying to create, like a membership type thing. Last year, all of it was around writing the book. So I try and spend the first couple of hours of every day focusing on book writing, and then spend the rest of the day in meetings or in calls or in just hanging out with people or doing the CEO vision stuff, just hanging around doing nothing. That's a pretty productive day.
And what I like about your description of a productive day, and this I think is a difficult thing for a lot of entrepreneurs, actually sounds like about 4 hours of real work, productive work, so to speak.
Yeah. In fact, it's often a lot less. It's 2 hours.
I was being generous.
Yeah. 2 hours of real work. And then, I don't consider doing a podcast real work because it's just kind of fun. I don't consider a business meeting or a brainstorm session real work because it's just sort of fun. But usually if I can get in just 2 hours of focused work on my main thing that I need to work on, whether it's vision or whether it's this project or whatever it is, that's ridiculously productive.
So what about other tips for entrepreneurs that don't have the same freedom you have? And the reason I say that is you've designed the system really well with a lot of emotional maturity and a lot of practicality about your topic, the way your system works, etc. What about for entrepreneurs that are currently in a more traditional setup, right? They are the CEO, they've got loads of things to do, they've got teams, they haven't quite managed to communicate yet that this is what productivity on steroids looks like. How would you coach them through actually getting to this place?
When I've been in this position, when I found myself coaching entrepreneurs like this in the past, one thing that's been really helpful is the Delegate Elevate matrix from Traction by Gino Wickman. Basically, just like make a list of all the things that you're really good at and you love doing, and a list of everything else, and then let's figure out how to delegate the everything else. Like that is as a matter of urgency. And usually, when I sit down with entrepreneurs and we make this list, they realize, oh, the things I enjoy are product and vision and strategy and, I don't know, doing podcasts, and everything else that's on my plate I don't actually enjoy. So then we try and circle as many of those things as we can and turn it into a job description so that they can hire someone for it. Because usually entrepreneurs have the ability to hire people to take stuff off their plate. That's step one. That frees up a lot of time. Step two is really defining the goal, the plan, and the system. I think one thing I often come back to with entrepreneurs, and I've stolen this from all the various business coaching sessions that I've had, is like bring it back to vision, mission, values initially, then turn it into 10-year picture, 3-year picture, 1-year goals. And at that point, we have so much clarity to be like, okay, we've got the 12-month goals for the business. This usually entrepreneurs pick too many 12-month goals for the business. So then it's about paring them down to like the absolute essentials. And then thinking, okay, what needs to be done in the next 90 days to get us to the 12-month goal? And therefore, what is the thing that the entrepreneur in particular needs to be focused on? The other thing I find that a lot of entrepreneurs do is they operate in parallel rather than in series. Like so it's like circuits in physics. It's like a series circuit is where you know the current goes through the bulbs one at a time, and a parallel circuit is the current splits into 4 and goes through all 4 bulbs at the same time. The issue with parallel processing is that it seems very productive. It seems like, oh, I'll do an hour of this, an hour of this, an hour of this, an hour of this, and then I'll make a little bit of progress in all these 4 different areas. But over time, that will add up to lots of, that will add up to loads of progress. But usually it doesn't work like that. You would think it works like that, but in practice, picking one thing and focusing on just that one thing until it's done, and then picking the next thing, and then the next, and then the next. Operating in series sequentially, I've always found, at least for me and a lot of the entrepreneurs that I speak to, is way more effective than trying to operate multiple things in parallel. So when writing the book, for example, busy entrepreneur will think, all right, cool, every day I'm going to make an hour of progress on my book, and then I'm going to get to my meetings, and I'm going to get to this and this and this and that. And if that's your lot in life and you literally have no control over that, then okay, you kind of have to go for that. But wherever possible, if you can find a way to be like, you know what, this week, I'm not going to turn up to any of my meetings because I trust my team to take care of that. And I'm just going to focus on the book. And I'm just going to make 50,000 words of progress in that 1 week. I think, James Clear has done a great job of this whole stuff around consistency. But I also think there is something to be said for intensity. Short periods of intensity, working on a project, focused effort, one at a time, tends to move the needle way more than a little bit of consistency on a lot of different things all over the long term. So that's the stuff I kind of find myself coaching entrepreneurs about. I feel
Naval says the same thing, right? He talks about working like a lion.
Yeah.
He says, people have this all wrong, and they say, I can't remember the other animal that he says most people suggest it to, but a lion will just lie in the savannah all day, all week, doing absolutely nothing. But when it's time to make the kill, intensity. Energy's got to feed the whole family. So, they look lazy as hell, but actually they're conserving energy, and it's probably the most productive killer in the animal kingdom. Yeah. I read on LinkedIn from everyone on LinkedIn and all the memes I see every day that turns out motivation is bollocks and it's all about discipline. But you're here telling me that every single genius on LinkedIn is probably wrong. So tell me a little bit about motivation instead of discipline.
Yeah. Okay. So I think discipline is important, but it gets to way too much credit. Discipline is useful in small doses. When in the morning, I wake up at 7:30 and I'm like, oh, I really don't want to go to the gym today. It takes a bit of discipline and a bit of, I don't want to let my personal trainer Janae down for me to get in the car and go to the gym. That's like a small dose of discipline. But then when I'm there, It's not discipline that's getting me through the workout. It's the personal trainer and the fact that if I'm working out on my own, I try and find a way to make it fun. I enjoy the process. I'm listening to an audiobook or like battle music from Lord of the Rings to feel more epic and doing a workout that I enjoy. I think discipline is good for getting started. Enjoyment is good for sustaining a particular thing. But I think also people are like, motivation is a myth. Motivation is temporary. And yes, it's true that like motivation is temporary, but there are in fact different forms of motivation. Most people are familiar with two forms, so extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic being, I'm motivated to do this because I'm getting paid, or I'm getting a reward, or I'm avoiding a punishment. Intrinsic, I'm motivated to do this because it's fun. This is sort of what I'm getting at with the gym. It's like, if you can make it fun, you're intrinsically motivated to do it. Intrinsic motivation, way better, much more longer lasting. The problem is, intrinsic motivation always wanes over time as well. So motivation is a bit of like waxes and wanes. Even when you're finding something fun, there are still times where it's not going to be fun all the time, where the intrinsic motivation dips. And so what do you do when the intrinsic motivation dips? You can use the language of discipline. You can be like, well, I'm going to do this thing anyway, which works for some people and doesn't work for others. But there are actually two more forms of motivation. There's introjected motivation and identified motivation. And these are both forms of extrinsic motivation. And so when we normally think extrinsic motivation is bad, intrinsic motivation is good, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, in that there are multiple types of extrinsic motivation. So we've got fully external motivation. Hey, Dan, let's do this podcast because you're going to get paid for it. Fully external. You've got introjected motivation, which is, I will feel really guilty and I will punish myself if I don't do this thing. This is like the negative self-talk that I've heard from a lot of students, for example, like, oh, if I don't study for this exam, I'm gonna be so disappointed in myself. I'll be such a failure. Like, I'm gonna let my family down, etc., etc. That is a very negative form of motivation that tends not to last. But then you have another form of external motivation, which is identified motivation, where it's like, you know what? I don't feel intrinsically motivated to go to the gym right now because it's not going to be fun. But I personally and authentically really value the outcome. I value the outcome of a healthy mind and a healthy body. And therefore, I'm going to go to the gym. So I'm not doing it purely intrinsically because it's fun, because eventually it stops being fun. But I'm doing it because I really, really, really value the outcome. And if you can remind yourself of the outcome that you're going for and kind of have a sense of where you are right now, that mental contrasting really helps you boost your motivation or discipline or whatever you want to call it to get to the gym, even when it stops being fun.
Amazing. I'd never heard of these.
Yeah, man, it's good shit. I hadn't either until I did the research for the book. And I came across this introjected. I was like, whoa, that's really cool.
Was it like when you're writing a book like this, just out of interest, you're trying to obviously be productive and you're aware that everything you're writing is going to probably get poo-pooed by the editor at some point, and then you come across something unique like that? Is that an amazing feeling where you're like, I haven't read this in all the other books yet?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I actually did read it in a book initially, but it was a book written by a psychology professor. The book is not going to be mainstream. No one's going to know about it. And so I found this story in this random book that this guy, Ken Sheldon, wrote around this Pacific Crest Trail, which is like the super intense like hiking trail in America. And he talked in this book, which was weirdly about free will. He just threw out that, oh yeah, there are 4 different types of motivation. And I was like, hold the fuck up. I swear there's only 2. And he went on, he's like, yeah, there's extrinsic, there's introjected, there's identified, and then there's intrinsic. I was like, fuck. So then I was like, immediately I was listening to it on Audible, bought it on Kindle so that I could go to the end and look at the references, find all the papers this guy's ever written, bring them into Zotero, my reference manager, read everything this guy, Ken Sheldon, has published in the last 40 years to try and find this insight. And I found the paper where he was telling the story, and I was like, yes, this is that final piece of the puzzle that I needed for the final chapter of the book. It was so nice. I love that feeling.
Okay, so we talk about discipline, we talk about motivation. How do you actually get up and go? How do you actually want to go to work on a day-to-day basis? So it goes a little bit further than that, right? It's feeling good.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, we all have to do things that we don't want to do sometimes. We all have to do things that are a little bit boring, a little bit dull. As entrepreneurs, it's a lot easier to delegate those things than as an employee. So my first protocol is that if you're an entrepreneur listening or watching this, you actually have the power to delegate things. So use that power, because most employees don't. But let's say for whatever reason, there are things that you don't enjoy doing that you have to do. I don't particularly enjoy reviewing our finances every month, but the fact that I own the business means I probably should review the finances every month. It's going to take me half an hour to go through the P&L, to understand what everything is, to double click on things, log into freaking QuickBooks and hope for the best, et cetera, et cetera. this is where the first 3 chapters of the book come in. Play, power, and people. How can I approach it in the spirit of play? How can I create a sense of power while I'm doing this? And how can I bring other people into the process? Play, power, and people. Now, we talked about play. You know, one way to do that is to sort of take it less seriously. The other way to do that, and this is actually a wallpaper I have on my phone, is by asking yourself the question, what would this look like if it were fun? And I used to have this as a post-it note before I went traveling on my computer monitor. What would this look like if it were fun? So let's say I need to review my financial accounts for the next 30 minutes. What would that look like if it were fun? If I had a gun to my head and I had to make it 10% more fun, what would I do?
Well, I mean, the gun to their head is a start.
Yeah, exactly. That would make it fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what would I do? Well, I probably wouldn't sit in my office and like hunched over on my laptop to do it. You know what? I'm going to review these accounts. I don't need to be in the office. Why don't I just go to the coffee shop downstairs? Well, you know, why don't I get a latte from Gales? Because obviously I'm an entrepreneur and living in an upwardly socially mobile area. Get my little latte from Gales. Get a little cookie as well, because why not? That'll make it fun. You know what? While I'm there, instead of doing this in silence, why don't I put on my headphones and listen to some music? You know what? What would make this feel like an adventure? I think the Lord of the Rings soundtrack would be really cool. That would make this fun. That would make me feel as if I'm in Helm's Deep or some shit, like trying to get through these accounts. How can I experience a sense of progress? This is a big part of power. Part of the reason why video games are so addictive is because you can see your leveling up bar going up and you feel like, yeah, I'm making progress. I'm leveling up. This is a big part of why writers track their word count, because they can see the number going up. So what is the equivalent for my writer's word count for these accounts? Maybe, I don't know, every time I used to do this at university, every time I reviewed a line on the accounts, why don't I just color code that line of the spreadsheet green? So then I can just feel the green going out. And then, you know, there's something weird about that where, you know, it's like the joy we get ticking things off a to-do list. Sometimes people will just put a task on they've already done just to be able to tick it off. It's a real sort of sense of like dopamine release and feeling like you're making progress. Cool. How can I make progress more visible? That's power. Another component of power is how can I connect this to helping someone in some way? And so if I can really just convince myself that the reason I'm doing these accounts is not because I have to, but because I get to, I choose to, I'm blessed to. Oh my goodness, how incredible is this? That I have this sort of business where every month, all I have to do is spend 30 minutes looking at the accounts and I can see how much money we've made. That's fucking incredible. And I can see how, we're paying all these salaries to the team. But the good part of that is that we're supporting their families. That's really good. It's like if you can genuinely convince yourself of these things, which you can, because it's not that hard to convince yourself because it's true, that gives you that sense of power, gives you that sense of purpose in what you're doing. And then finally, people. How can I bring other people into this? One thing I enjoy doing is...
Like the barista, the person who made your cookie.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Exactly. You'd be like, hey, do you want to help see my financial accounts? It might be a bit of a dick move.
Yeah, they do not.
But no. One thing I really enjoy is arranging like co-working sessions with friends. Like if it's a Saturday and I've got like a few hours to kill in between like a lunch and a dinner or whatever.
Yeah, we did one in King's Cross together.
Oh yeah, we did. It's like I'll just message a couple of people who I know are in London and be like, hey, I'm chilling at the Paddington WeWork. I can get you all in. Who wants to come and work for a few hours? And friends will come over. So actually last Saturday, initially it was just me and I was working on a landing page for one of our products in WeWork in Paddington. But I messaged a few friends and then it ended up being a party with like 6 of us there. And we were playing some music and we had the whole place to ourselves because no one was around, and we were playing some table tennis. So there are always ways to also try and get people into the thing that you are doing. Mm-hmm. So play, power, and people, the 3 Ps that make anything, however boring, however dull, more energizing. But obviously as an entrepreneur, try and delegate the stuff you don't enjoy.
I love it. I think the thing that's really interesting just on that exact point as well, coming back to productivity is about the output of the thing you're trying to do, not necessarily a quantity. So people hear this, they're like, so you went to WeWork in Paddington to do some work on a landing page, and then you invited a bunch of mates and you ate food, danced and played ping pong. So Did you do the fucking thing or not?
Yeah, finish the landing page.
Exactly.
And I also did a bunch of random ass errands that I was putting off because I couldn't be asked to do them. Yeah. But having 6 friends there in a WeWork, where actually, you know what? I might as well book these flights. I might as well look at the accounts. I might as well do this.
Yeah, these are the surprising things that actually do happen when you're enjoying the stuff around, because you're kind of trying to wait for the right insight and the right creative moment to strike. And those things are all triggered better when you're in a good mood, when you're around people you love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I have a final question, actually. So, Ali, firstly, thank you. Congratulations on publishing your first book.
Thank you.
Slightly more private, but because I'm your friend and I know this stuff, you sort of didn't have a goal of having it as New York Times bestseller, but you sort of did really have that goal and had to deal with the what's it like internally with my ego getting damaged if it doesn't get there, and then obviously it did.
Yeah.
How did it feel genuinely to have got there? And are you over it already? Or are you able to sustain the joy of having such a great accomplishment?
Yeah, honestly, it felt like a major relief. It was one of those goals, hitting the New York Times list, where I knew it was possible, but we just had to work really hard to get there. And those are the sorts of goals that are kind of annoying because you just know you have to put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so it was down to the wire, like the week before, we did not have a shot of hitting the list because we didn't have enough pre-orders. But on the week of, all of the marketing came together, like the podcasts I'd done ahead of time, all batched, the stars aligned, and we just made it onto the list. So that was cool. That was a major relief.
So you worked like a lion.
Yeah, to an extent. Yeah, we really focused on that week of launch. But what's interesting about it, and I knew this would happen because I'd spoken to like Ryan Holiday and Mark Manson and stuff who've hit the list many times, is that I knew the joy would fade very quickly. And I don't think I've even upgraded my like social media bios to say New York Times bestselling author. And now when I find myself like before this was published, I was thinking, oh, it'd be so good to be able to say in videos, hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a doctor turned entrepreneur, the author of the New York Times bestseller, Feel Good Productive. When I'm making videos, I don't even say New York Times bestseller because it just feels a bit like, yeah, cool. We did the thing. And it weirdly feels like nothing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same thing with, it's like what everyone says when you accomplish a goal, like the glow of the celebration lasts maybe a day or two, and then you go back to your previous state. And I knew that this would happen because I'd read a lot about this. I knew that this phenomenon was going to be a thing, and I knew that whether or not we hit the list, I wouldn't care a few days later. And so we hit the list. It was great. Thank you to everyone who supported the book, but it now feels like nothing.
Yeah.
Other than like, cool, that box has been ticked, so now I can chill a little bit more.
So for real productivity, enjoy the process.
Yeah, it's all about enjoying the process. And at various points in the book writing journey, I'd forgotten that. And it took my editor or my book coach or whatever to be like, Holly, I think we should take our own advice here and treat this process a little bit less seriously, a little bit more sincerely, a little bit more lightness and ease. And yeah, focus on the things within our control. And I'd be like, that's a really good point. Some good advice. Let's make sure that's in the book.
Awesome. Okay. And also, if you're a keen ear and you're listening, don't just buy the book, but my cat is giving you a glowing review outside.
Oh, that's your cat?
Apologize for that. Yeah.
Nice.
It's time to let her in.
That was the baby.
Ali, thanks so much for coming to our new Secret Leader studio. It's been a pleasure. And I'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me, man. This is so sick. And good luck with the rest of the pod.
Thanks. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Of course. I'm going to listen to your Matt Lerner episode, like on the Uber to Central London.
Good man. Comments. Leave some comments.
Absolutely.